A city in the clouds, held up by quantum physics, DNA-altering tonics, a fanatical prophet running the show. Sounds impossible, right? Yet Columbia, the setting of BioShock Infinite, isn't just wild sci-fi. It mixes real science with fiction in a way that makes you wonder, could any of this ever be real? So let's dive in, because after everything I'm about to show you, you might realize Columbia is beautiful on the outside, but horrifying underneath. And the real question is, could you survive even one day there? Before we talk about floating physics, we've got to understand how Columbia even came to be, and why. In the world of BioShock Infinite, Columbia was an American project from the late 1800s. It was meant to show off the nation's power, technological progress, and national pride. Imagine it, a city floating through the skies, traveling the world, dazzling everyone with America's supposed greatness. But what started as flashy political propaganda quickly turned dark. In 1901, during the Boxer Rebellion in China, Columbia was sent overseas to intervene. Instead of following diplomatic orders, it unleashed military force, resulting in a brutal international massacre. The US tried to deny responsibility, but Columbia broke away from the country entirely, vanishing into the clouds to become its own independent nation. The sudden independence paved the way for a new ruler, Zachary Hale Comstock, self-proclaimed prophet of Columbia. He used the city's isolation to impose his twisted vision of pure Americanism, a cocktail of religious fanaticism, racial primacy, and blind faith in destiny. Sounds extreme, until you realize how much of it echoes real history. Comstock's ideology is drawn straight from America's manifest destiny era, the belief that Americans had a divine mission to expand and dominate. In the 1800s, that thinking fueled wars, justified slavery, and drove the genocide of indigenous peoples. Columbia is like a warped mirror, showing what might have happened if those beliefs went completely unchecked. And the racism in Columbia isn't fiction either. In the early 1900s, the US was booming with industry and technology while maintaining vicious segregation laws and violent racial oppression. In Columbia, citizens are split into pure and impure, with a white Christian elite on top, while black people, Irish immigrants, and other minorities live in poverty and servitude. Even the game's rebel group, the Vox Populi, draws inspiration from real-life resistance movements like the Black Panthers or labor unions of the early 20th century. Their conflict with Columbia's ruling class is a blunt metaphor for inequality, resistance, and revolution, themes that remain powerfully relevant today. Ultimately, Columbia is a carefully disguised critique. It takes genuine pieces of American history, nationalism, religious extremism, racial and economic inequality, and exaggerates them to show how such ideals, if taken to the extreme, can poison a society from within. That's why BioShock Infinite is so brilliant. It's not just a gorgeous game. It forces you to confront uncomfortable truths. Columbia might look like paradise from afar, but it's rotten to its core, a utopia that slowly reveals its dystopian face. But let's tackle the big question. Could Columbia really float in the sky? In BioShock Infinite, Columbia isn't just a backdrop. It's a scientific marvel. It's held afloat by something completely fictional, the Lutece Particle, which can manipulate gravity at the quantum level. The so-called Lutece field keeps entire city blocks floating. It looks like magic, but in the game's world, it's sold as cutting-edge science. In real life, the closest technology we have is magnetic levitation, like maglev trains. These trains use powerful magnets to float above the track, eliminating friction and reaching speeds of over 370 miles per hour. Japan, for example, has maglev trains hitting 374 miles per hour, which is incredible. But those systems demand insane infrastructure, precision-aligned tracks, carefully controlled magnetic fields, and enormous power consumption. Now, imagine scaling that up to an entire city. Colombia isn't a single train car. It's sprawling neighborhoods, bridges, moving platforms, and skyscrapers. The weight of such a city could easily run into billions of pounds. Even the most powerful nuclear reactors we have, like France's EPR reactors, generating up to 1,600 megawatts, couldn't keep that mass floating. And the game goes even further. Colombia doesn't just hover, it moves. It sails through the skies, changes positions, and escapes conflict zones. That's a whole new level of engineering nightmares. Winds, storms, and atmospheric pressure shifts would make the city's stability an absolute nightmare to manage. Even if we imagine smaller floating platforms, the engineering problem remains. We'd need ultra-strong materials, real-time balance systems, and practically limitless energy sources. One tiny mistake in weight distribution could cause a catastrophic collapse. BioShock Infinite sidesteps these realities by treating the Lutece Particle as magic science. The game never explains it fully, letting the story dodge the messy physics, thermodynamics, and sustainability questions. But in our real world, even maintaining the International Space Station, just 420 tons, requires constant supply missions and billions of dollars in upkeep. And beyond the engineering, who would govern a floating city like Colombia? You'd need international treaties, environmental regulations, and unimaginable funding. NASA's entire 2024 budget was around $25 billion, and that wouldn't even scratch the surface of Colombia's costs. So, as incredible as it seems, Colombia remains firmly in fiction. The Lutece Particle gives it a thin veneer of scientific credibility, but real-life limits in power, materials, and political reality make it utterly impossible. But if you thought a floating city was nuts, wait until you hear about Colombia's superpowered drinks. In Colombia, you can drink from a flashy bottle, and suddenly, boom, you've got superpowers. You want to shoot fire from your hands? Mind control your enemies. There's a Vigor for that. They're everywhere, sold like soft drinks. But what if that were real? What would happen to your body if you drank something that rewrote your biology in seconds? The idea sounds absurd, but in the first game's lore, it's rooted in something called Atom, first introduced in the original BioShock. Atom has rule-breaking properties that can alter human DNA almost instantly. It all started with deep-sea slugs, but was refined, in Colombia, into tonics through the use of the Lutece particles. In the real world, we're barely scratching the surface of rewriting our DNA. Modern gene therapies can correct faulty genes, but require viruses to carry genetic material, tightly controlled lab conditions, and take weeks or months to work. What Vigors do would be like delivering an entire genetic overhaul instantly, in a single sip. It would demand complete cellular reprogramming, rewiring the nervous system, and shunting massive amounts of energy around the body. The human body simply couldn't handle it. And about that energy, shooting fire from your hands would require temperatures over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to melt steel. The energy to produce that heat in real time would be like discharging dozens of car batteries in seconds. The human body can't store even a fraction of that energy without incinerating itself from the inside out. And the game hints at this cost. Vigor users develop visible lesions, especially on their arms. They suffer hallucinations, and over time, many lose touch with reality. That mirrors real-life phenomena. Substances that rapidly alter brain chemistry can cause neurotoxicity, psychotic breaks, and even permanent personality changes. Want a real-life comparison? Think about powerful hallucinogens like PCP. They mess with neurotransmitters, scramble neural pathways, and with long-term use, can induce everything from violent outbursts to drug-induced schizophrenia. Now imagine that, but supercharged with destructive powers. You'd end up with a city full of people dangerously unhinged and heavily armed. And producing Vigors isn't exactly safe either. One of the biggest disasters in Colombia's history was the Devil's Kiss incident in 1900, when a lab exploded during testing of the explosive Vigor. It killed 359 workers in a single blast, a massive industrial catastrophe. Yet, the company, Fink Manufacturing, covered it up and kept selling the product after police pressure. It's a pretty sharp critique of corporate greed and ethical blindness when it comes to high-risk scientific experiments. In the end, Vigors are a reminder of how far sci-fi is willing to go to explore our obsession with power. They promise instant strength, but at a terrifying cost, physically, mentally, and socially. In Colombia, addiction to Vigors is a silent epidemic, fueled by illusion of ultimate control. But even if you could survive the side effects of drinking liquid superpowers, you'd face another problem. How the heck do you travel around a flying city full of sky rails at breakneck speed? In the game, riding Colombia's skylines looks like the ultimate roller coaster. You grab the skyhook and go hurtling across the skyline hundreds of feet above the ground, whipping through loops, switching rails mid-air, and sometimes fighting enemies while hanging on. It's pure adrenaline. But could anyone actually survive that in real life? Or would it be instant death? Let's talk G-forces. High-speed roller coasters hit peaks around 4 or 5 Gs. That's already enough to cause blurred vision, fainting, and muscle strain. On Colombia's skylines, the movements are even wilder. Tight turns, vertical climbs, sudden drops. You'd likely face forces over 6 Gs, requiring the kind of physical training fighter pilots endure. And unlike an amusement park ride, there are no seatbelts, harnesses, helmets, or safety bars. You're clinging on with your bare hands while your body swings violently at speeds easily over 60 miles per hour. Then there's the neck. Every sharp turn or abrupt stop would slam your cervical spine, creating micro-injuries that over time could cause chronic pain, inflammation, and even permanent spinal damage. Not to mention the ever-present risk of slipping, especially with sweaty or injured hands. And falling from that height? Let's just say there's no respawn in real life. Your arms and shoulders would also be under insane strain. You'd be supporting your body weight with one hand for long stretches. The repeated stress could cause muscle fatigue, dislocations, or even torn tendons. And here's the wildest part. Booker does all of this one-handed because he's busy shooting with the other hand. Unless you're half machine, that's just physically impossible. To make the skylines remotely feasible, you'd need safety gear, shock absorbers, speed regulators, and emergency protocols. But in Colombia, none of that exists. The city goes all in on style and completely ignores human biomechanics. And yet, Booker survives. He not only rides these rails, but fights on top of them, switches between them mid-air, and then casually walks away as if nothing happened. But what about the weapons he carries? Let's talk about how realistic Colombia's arsenal really is. In Colombia, even the guns feel like they've stepped out of a steampunk fever dream. Some weapons make historical sense, like revolvers and shotguns, but others feel ripped straight from World War II or some alternate sci-fi timeline. Let's start with the normal weapons, like the broadsider pistol and the China broom shotgun. Both are based on real turn-of-the-century firearms. Revolvers with rotating cylinders, pump-action shotguns, all of that existed back then and worked well. But remember, these were heavy, solid steel weapons without modern ergonomics. Carrying one all day was like hauling around a dumbbell in your holster. Now imagine the combat scenes in the game. Booker is constantly sprinting, shooting, leaping, and swinging on skylines, all without losing accuracy. In reality, firing a vintage shotgun repeatedly would have enough recoil to dislocate your shoulder, and reloading under combat stress would demand nerves of steel and surgical coordination, nearly impossible mid-fight. Then we have the truly insane weapons, like the RRR machine gun. Inspired by the MP-18, the first functional submachine gun, this design only emerged in 1918. Yet, in BioShock Infinite, it already exists in 1912, complete with high-capacity drums and a firing rate of 500 rounds per minute. That's a full decade early in terms of military engineering. And even if it existed, it would be brutally unreliable, overheating barrels, insane recoil, and constant maintenance needs. Then there are rocket launchers and grenade launchers like the Pig Flak Volley Gun and the Barnstormer RPG. The first shoulder-fired rocket launchers didn't appear until the 1940s. Why? Because it took decades to develop stable rocket propellants, safe firing mechanisms, and protective shielding against the blast. Carrying a functional RPG in 1912 would be like strapping a ticking bomb to your back. In the game, Booker swaps weapons like he's changing shirts, but in real life, a rocket launcher alone can weigh 15 pounds. Add ammo, sidearms, and supplies, and you'd be weighed down like a pack mule. Even trained soldiers take breaks just to handle that load. And we can't forget Columbia's star tool, the Skyhook. Part transportation device, part brutal melee weapon. It's used both to zip along rails and to pulverize enemies. But let's be real, a metal device sturdy enough to carry a human at high speed would easily weigh over 20 pounds. Using it as a weapon would demand monstrous wrist and forearm strength. And that's without factoring in the impact shock from every strike. Bottom line, most of Columbia's weapons are wildly exaggerated. A few have real historical roots, but others stretch the timeline so far, they snap. They work perfectly in a game, but in 1912 reality, they'd be unmanageable, dangerous, or outright impossible. So, with Vigors in your bloodstream, skylines overhead, and heavy weapons on your back, there's just one last question. Could you survive even one day in Columbia? Picture waking up in a floating city that's at war. A sky full of zeppelins, religious fanatics trying to kill you, rails twisting overhead, and people literally exploding things with their minds. Now add the fact that you've got to run, fight, jump, shoot, drink questionable, glowing liquids, and make moral decisions that could change the fate of the universe. That's a normal day for Booker DeWitt. Let's be honest, most of us wouldn't last an hour. And it's not just mental toughness, it's plain biology. Intense physical activity like combat burns between 800 and 1200 calories per hour. If you don't replace that energy fast, your body crashes. In Columbia, there's no time for real meals, hydration, or sleep. The best Booker finds are half-eaten apples and trash cans, and random cigarettes. Yum! Now imagine the cardiovascular strain of leaping between buildings, gripping skylines, and firing weapons at enemies. All while your heart pounds over 160 beats per minute. Exhaustion would hit fast, and your coordination would fall apart. And let's not forget injuries. In the game, Booker takes bullets, explosions, and punches, and just shrugs it off. In real life, one bullet to the leg would end your mobility. One hard hit to the ribs could cause internal bleeding. Then there's the mental side. The trauma, anxiety, and sensory overload would trigger cognitive breakdowns. A human brain under extreme stress and sleep deprivation starts hallucinating in under 36 hours. It's no coincidence BioShock Infinite blurs timelines and reality itself, mimicking how disorienting such chaos would feel. So the answer is simple. No, you wouldn't survive a day in Columbia. Not with military training, not with luck, not even if you were in peak physical shape. Columbia is a stylized fantasy world where adrenaline and visual spectacle cover up the true biological costs. But in the real world, even the toughest soldier would collapse before dinner. Columbia is both a visual masterpiece and a terrifying thought experiment. On the surface, it's a shining utopia floating among the clouds, but dig deeper, and it's a fragile society fueled by radical ideology, exploitation of science, and extreme social inequality. From a scientific standpoint, almost nothing in Columbia holds up. The floating city breaks fundamental physics, Vigors ignore biology and thermodynamics, skylines defy human biomechanics, the weaponry leaps decades ahead of 1912 technology. Yet, that's exactly why BioShock Infinite is so fascinating. It immerses us in a world that feels almost real until you start doing the math. And when the numbers don't add up, it leaves you pondering a bigger question. How much are we willing to believe for the sake of a good story? Now I want to hear from you. Which part of Colombia did you find the most insane? The floating city itself? The superpowered drinks? Or the idea of zipping around on rails while shooting machine guns one-handed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into science meets fiction, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out our other deep dives into the worlds of pop culture, where we mix awesome storytelling with just a dash of cold, hard reality. Until next time, and hey, careful with those Vigors.